gears a little bit here. So come on up and get your piece right here. So one of the things which I'm excited about as an environmentalist is I don't have to be an expert on everything. I consider myself pretty well educated, pretty well informed, but one of the neat things that we get to do is we get to partner with some wonderful organizations. And the folks at the Center for Biological Diversity have done some of really tremendous work here in California and nationally. And Valerie can tell you a little bit about her role and the work of CBD, but it's how we amplify our voices. We find folks that are subject matter experts. We have folks that are involved in the rail issue, in water issues, transportation issues, and I'm just so pleased and excited that we could bring Valerie down from, you're in Hope, right? Berkeley.
In Berkeley, our office is based in Oakland.
Okay, that's and Valerie is a relatively newly married woman, and I'm excited for her. So let's give Valerie a round of applause. And like you, there's lots of places she could be on a Tuesday night where I'm unpaid. You're a staff person, so you can't.
It's true. Today is technically supposed to be a holiday.
You can't say that, but she found time in her schedule to join us. So again, please join me in welcoming Valerie Love.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me and for being here tonight. It's good to see. I mean, I work as an organizer for the Center for Biological Diversity around climate and energy issues, so there's nothing that gives me greater pleasure than to see people coming together to face with open eyes and an open heart what's really going on, and come together around, what can we do in the places that we live and the communities that we are. So I'm going to talk a little more about oil trains specifically, the industries, some of the practices, some of the problems, because it bridges many different issues, right? All from climate to health and safety, air quality, and as we know, these issues are inextricably related. So, and then I'm going to kind of drill down to how this affects San Jose, the decision that's going to be made a little bit more on the refinery rail expansion in San Luis Obispo County, how that affects you, and what you can do about it. So, let me start just by taking y'all back to a night in July of 2013. Folks in Lac Mégantic, Quebec, are hanging out at a bar, the Lucy Cafe. It's just a little after midnight when a lone engineer improperly sets the brakes on a train above the town. The brakes start to wear out, the air lock, and the train starts slowly careening down the hill, and it picks up speed, and suddenly it's, roaring down the hill, it careens off the tracks, it hits, people in the bar think that it's an earthquake. So some of them run outside, some of them get under tables, and lo and behold, this train comes crashing through, it kills 47 people instantly, and half of the town is destroyed. The other half had to be demolished later because of contamination throughout. It was a very, very small town. Everybody knew someone who died that night. So part of the question to ask ourselves is, is this a freak accident? Like, freak accidents happen. Is this a freak accident? And I would argue, no, it's not. That was an early sign of an industry that routinely puts profits ahead of the health and safety of people, as well as the well-being of our environment. And it has only been this is the most chilling example, but the foreshadowing of a pattern that's just been increasing in North America. So, in 2008, there was just under 10,000 tank cars of crude oil shipped by rail, and in 2013, that number increased by 4,000%. It was about 420,000 tank cars.
Was it being shipped
In North America. Yeah, so this is the increase in crude by rail, oil train transport in North America. And of course, with that comes more oil train disasters. So in 2013, more oil was spilled from trains than in the previous 4 decades. And in 2014, there were more incidents than any other year on record, more accidents. This is another one in Castleton, North Dakota. A train actually collided with, a train was carrying grain and derailed, and then an oil train hit it and collided and shot this massive fireball into the sky. And luckily, no one was hurt in this one, but there have been many accidents in different parts of the U.S. where homes have been destroyed, rivers have been contaminated, and you can just see by the massive explosions that you do not want this anywhere near your town, near where you live, near where your kids go to school. And of course, we'll soon see where the proposed route is for this project, coming right through your neighborhoods. Sorry, what?
The population in the Bay Area would be a disaster.
Yes, yes, and then coming right through San Jose. So why is this happening? What are some of the practices, the unsafe practices that are leading towards these accidents? One of them is unsafe tank cars. So DOT 111s are kind of the famous example of these really unsafe tank cars. They're like tin cans on wheels. They were originally made in the 1970s, and they were designed to carry corn syrup. So not what you want hazardous, highly flammable materials to be carried in. And currently, it's about 69% of the North American fleet is these DOT 111 cars. So the thing is, then they said, oh, well, we're switching to these 1232 cars. And these are much safer, don't worry about it. And lo and behold, 2015, they start using more of these cars, and we see accidents like this in Mount Carbon, West Virginia. This one was where a home was destroyed. Someone barely, made it out of their house before it hit. And again, the fireball just kind of takes your breath away in terms of the sheer impact and size. So that was using the new model of tank cars. Right, so suddenly we see there have been, I believe, 5 crashes just this year with oil train, with these new 1232 tank cars that had derailed, punctured, and exploded.
And before you did the slide, the Conster would be remiss in not acknowledging that this carbon-intensive project, not Carbon, West Virginia, and the explosion was near Boomer Ranch Road. Very apropos, don't you think?
Truly. And I should say, so there have been some new regulations that came out, and that we're trying to address some of these issues, right, on the federal level. They came out in May of this year, and basically they still give a 10-year span to remove both of these, the DOT 111 and the 1232s, off the rails. But even when you look at it, the newest new cars, they're always going to be, this is the safe way to do it, and we're just seeing that's really not true. That the models that in 10 years they'll be using, they still only have a puncture resistance of 18 miles per hour on the head of the tank car and 12 miles per hour on the sides. And anyone want to guess what the speed limit that they simultaneously set in these regulations are?
35.
Higher. 50. In most parts of the country, 50. They designated a few areas, dense cities they call, high urban threat areas, something like that, which are not just because of density, but because they've identified them as terrorist threat zones. But that, I don't think San Jose is on the list. And so yeah, for most of the country it's 50, sometimes it's 40, but there's a big gap between the 18 mile per hour, 12 mile per hour puncture resistance and the speeds that they're traveling. Okay, so what does this have to do with us? So that pin should really be in San Luis Obispo County, because last week I had a presentation in LA. But, so there is this rail terminal project that Brian was explaining. It's, I'll try to skip over what he already explained, but Phillips 66 wants to build this rail terminal and bring in tar sands from Canada, so the most likely route is coming up through, right through San Jose, through the Bay Area, through Sacramento, and then one of the northern rail lines entrances into the state. It also could come from the south, so and basically, once it's approved, they can use whatever fuel source, whatever rails they want, because as Brian said, at that point it's federally regulated, no one can have a say about it, they can kind of switch as they like. But at this point, we are expecting they've named in their environmental impact report that tar sands from Canada is the primary source. And so San Jose is definitely on that route going south.
So we don't know yet which way it will go, but it could come in any of these directions.
It could, yeah, technically it could. And they're in the environmental impact report, they kind of highlight all the way, down through to LA, up to Sacramento, and then that's, the like definitely impacted zone. And then beyond that, they just say, it's any of these routes, so it's kind of
Is it
uncertain.
going to the port of San Luis Obispo or?
So, yeah, I actually heard someone asking a question about it behind me before we started, and she was wondering, well, I heard that it would go to Rodeo, or to the Bay Area, right? So Rodeo's up in the Bay Area, and they have a funny refinery model. So basically, it's like two halves of a refinery split across 200 miles, and the first half they kind of partially refine crude in San Luis Obispo, and then they pipe it up to the Bay Area to finish it, and then sell it. And obviously easy access to global markets.
So, okay, but they're first bringing these tar sands down
Yes.
from Canada
Yes.
to San Luis Obispo.
Yeah.
Then piping it.
Back up. Yep.
Now,
Down
where
and back
are
up.
these pipes in place?
They are, yes. That's already operational.
Where exactly in San Luis Obispo is the refinery?
It's on what they call the Napomo Mesa, so in kind of South County, just almost, just over the border from Santa Barbara County. So far
Is it
south
already
on the coast.
constructed, or is it something new?
So the refinery is constructed. What they need permission to build is the rail spur, or the rail yard. So they can connect up to the rail line for the first time and build, 5 parallel tracks to the unloading and reloading these massive trains. They're also, I should say, they're a mile long. They're 80 tank cars long, and each one carries about 2.5 million gallons of oil.
And how near is it to the Diablo Canyon nuclear reactor? The plant? I mean, just curious here.
I don't think that's.
No, okay, just wondering, just
Well, I was wondering if it's near the coast. And does
It
the coast-
is.
Does the coastal commission have any
I like the way you
jurisdiction?
think. Yes. It
Could they
is
be
on the
involved?
coast, and we can appeal it to the coastal commission should the vote not go our way.
Well, question, both of you said something about federal regulations. So could you explain that process? Like he said, if the city says, no, we don't want it, it can be overrode by the federal?
Yes.
And that
Oh, well, okay, so here's, the difference. Basically, we're looking at this massive problem, which is, the oil train industry just exploding, metaphorically and literally, in North America. And where can we actually have an impact to slow or stop the amount of trains that are coming through our towns? California is a newer area for oil train traffic, and actually right now San Jose does not have oil trains coming through it. So, yeah, the way that you can prevent that from happening is by preventing the construction of this rail terminal project. So Phillips 66, basically, if they build it, they will come. If they don't build it, they will not come. And this strategy, this isn't the only proposal in California. This is a strategy that people are organizing around in the Bay Area. There was a proposal in LA that got pulled, in Sacramento, but there are kind of these organizing fights that have been having an impact. And so far, many of them have been stopped or delayed because of massive public pressure.
Well, okay, coming to the Bay Area now?
So right now there is a Kinder Morgan facility in Richmond that oil trains were traveling to there up until I think around actually a year ago. They slowed down and stopped because it was cost prohibitive. So when prices bounce back, that is an approved terminal. So it's being contested under the Air Quality Management District. Anyway, a different mechanism, but.
Authorize the terminal. The feds authorize the.
No, okay, so yeah, back to your question. So local governments make that decision because it's a land use decision.
Okay.
So whether to build it or not is a local decision. Once they approve it or they reject it, like that's it. Like say they approve it, now we can pretty much never do anything again. And they have the permission to bring in oil trains for decades to come. So now is the moment. That's why it's so important. And that's why it's important that San Luis Obispo understands that they're not just making a local land use decision. They're making a decision that will impact communities up and down California for decades to come. So,
And did you say the federal, I mean, the rails are federal, so
yes,
there's no way, they're open to everybody, is that
that's
what you're
right.
saying?
Is there any agency, federal agency that can be appealed to, that controls the rails, to object in that way?
Yeah. And that's, I mean, there were just regulations on oil trains that came out in May, but they probably won't redo those for, I mean, I don't know how many years or decade more. There are a few ways to go with that. We have some legal petitions around the length and weight of trains because it's been shown that they're so heavy and so long that, and with tracks being imperfect, that can often cause accidents. So length, weight, track maintenance, there are more angles that we can kind of appeal of as well.
What about the safety of the cars themselves?
That was what just got addressed, and we think, it was, as I explained, pretty weak and ineffective. And it probably will be a while till we get to come back around on that. So given that's the federal, regulatory environment, that's why we're saying, this isn't worth the risk for our communities. Don't build these terminals, don't bring these trains in. Okay, so, this is just zooming into San Jose, so you can see, again, these are two parallel tracks that either one could be used. And this is from the Forest Ethics website, so you can go to forestethics.org, or this site is blast-zone. blast-zone.org. And you can search for your place, you can zoom in, you can see exactly, where these lines go. And the red and the yellow are, the red is 0.5 miles on either side of the track, and then yellow is 1 mile. And so 0.5 miles is, according to the Department of Transportation, one of those bodies that regulates train traffic. According to the Department of Transportation, that 0.5 miles is the initial evacuation zone for, technically it's only for a single tank car fire, which rarely happens, it's usually multiple tank car fires. And then 1 mile is the evacuation zone that's used most of the time for multiple tank car fires. So basically, red zone, very dangerous for like direct impacts from the derailment, and then 1 mile, there are toxic smoke plumes that happen in these fires. So you can kind of see what's your level of risk, where are you, where are your kids. We actually did a study in California that showed that 1 million school children, just in California, go to school within 1 mile of a current oil train route. And current by, like, there have been oil trains actually passing through there in the last 18 months.
Now, do you have trains like Amtrak and all that? Are a lot of the rails already there? Are they using the same?
Yes, yeah.
Set of tracks?
Yep, yeah, most of the time it's the same as the Amtrak line.
And interesting aside, freight takes priority over passengers.
Yes.
So these mile-long oil tank cars that have to move at slower speeds for safety through urban areas
So they're gonna.
will delay passenger.
Oh, yes, yes. The rails are owned by the freight railroads, not by Amtrak. Amtrak uses rails that it does not. And we've been on Amtrak trains that were waiting for oil trains in North Dakota and other places.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and it used to be, just in California without oil trains, just other freight trains, sometimes you used to have to wait a long time. They've improved that, so it's not so bad anymore.
But yeah, with some of these projects potentially going through, that can shift.
And their proposal is up to 5 train loads a week. It's basically
Yes, thank you.
250 loads a year.
Yes, exactly. And you have to think of the trains coming in and the trains going out, so, 500 trains a year on the tracks, 250 of them coming in, each with 2.5 million gallons of oil.
And as long as, we'll be looking at this, it's also right by the bay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the water treatment plant.
yeah, I mean, you can trace through just like the number of important water sources, right? Like sensitive habitats, dense communities, schools, agricultural zones. I mean, it just goes through everything. And of course, these rails weren't designed, they were designed to transport, food and people and not hazardous materials. So the routes go right connecting dense, population centers. So what is it bringing? I won't go into this too much, but Brian mentioned it. Tar sands, one of the dirtiest fuels on the planet, coming from Alberta, Canada, much heavier in, much higher carcinogens and toxins, benzene, gross stuff essentially. And you can see it looks like really heavy and thick and dirty. That is true, but as Brian said again, because of that, they have to dilute it, add a bunch of weird chemicals, and it becomes quite flammable and explosive. It takes 3 to 4 times the carbon to produce tar sands than conventional oil. And yeah, this was the point about it. For a while, people were like, oh, it's this heavy, thick oil, it won't explode. And of course, they weren't telling us how the diluents changed that equation. And so this is in Ontario, Canada, just earlier this year, where a train carrying tar sands derailed, punctured, exploded, and this was in -40 degrees, and it burned for 6 days. So it's scary stuff.
Why isn't Canada doing anything? Are they?
They've been more aggressive on removing the older cars and shifting the older cars to the United States.
Does Canada have any refineries of the type that they want to use in St. Louis? So they would have to come down here?
There are some, a lot of this is kind of new infrastructure that's being proposed. There is some, in Western, in BC, but everywhere along the West Coast, these projects are being contested. So, yeah, from BC and Washington State, there's a bunch, those are closer too, right? So that's like the most economically viable is to get it out there. California is like second choice. Then to the Gulf, yeah. But that, at this point, that's higher cost than any of the locations on the West Coast. So there is more refinery capacity there in the Gulf Coast, but it's just not economically viable. Anyway, it's dirtier and more dangerous to refine, so the folks in Rodeo are very concerned about this as well, and have been fighting some expansion projects in Rodeo that are linked to bringing in this dirtier type of crude. As I said, I already gave the statistics on school children, and then nationwide, 25 million Americans live in the blast zone or within 1 mile of an oil train route. So that's kind of like, it's the bad news, and in some weird way, it's a piece of the good news, which is that it affects personally so many people, and that gives us the opportunity to come together and fight for a more sane future, energy future.
And before you leave this slide, some of you know I'm a former Seattleite. In this picture, what you're seeing here, it's a view north towards downtown. The rail lines literally go right behind Safeco Field where the Mariners play. Right north of that is CenturyLink Field where the Seahawks play football, and it goes under the city of Seattle. It's a tunnel that goes underneath the city of Seattle and then merges on the north end. So yeah, so if we had a major disaster in Seattle, thousands of people at risk.
As a football fan, it's okay if they blow up the Seattle Stadium. Sorry.
Do you like hockey? The San Jose line goes right by the compact, what's it called, the Shark Tank there, it goes right by the Shark Tank, and all the, you know, within like 50 feet of the Del Monte, the old cannery, the new apartments that are there and stuff, it's just right next to the apartments.
So we have power when we come together. And in California, there have already been examples of, Pittsburgh, California. This is a very, industry-oriented, conservative, mostly conservative town. And like in the Bay Area, it was just like, you can't organize in Pittsburgh, that's impossible. But it happened. Like local leaders emerged, and Bay Area activists got behind them, knocking on doors, educating. And through that, the crude by rail project specifically has been delayed indefinitely. We actually just heard they took that option off the table entirely. Los Angeles, they filed a permit and they withdrew it. It was the same company, actually, Valero, that has filed in Benicia to a proposed oil train project. And we think that they were hit with such, public outrage in Benicia. They're like, whoa, like we're not ready for this. We have to figure out our strategy. They probably are coming back to LA, but we'll be ready for them, our strategy. So Benicia, the project's been delayed. Sacramento project's been shut down. So people are, uniting all across the state on this issue, saying, we're not going to be a superhighway for dangerous, dirty, toxic tar sands and other extreme forms of fuel. And for Salem, yes?
When you say project stop, do you mean like they're not building the roadways in those facilities?
Yeah, those are all like refineries that wanted to build out a rail terminal and bring in oil trains, same way that Phillips 66 does in San Luis Obispo. So in San Luis Obispo, they've also faced massive public pressure, and it's been thanks to, honestly, like activists up and down the rail line. That's part of what I do is, travel up and down, meet with people, and honestly, it's one of those, it's what they call like a hot shot organizing project, because it doesn't take a lot of convincing. People see the pictures, they read the stats. It's pretty common sense, like I don't want a rolling bomb coming through my community. So what has happened through all of that? At this point, I think it's actually 26 cities and counties have written letters against the project. So This is writing letters, again, they can't make the decision, so they're writing to San Luis Obispo to say, hey, you're making this decision, it affects us, we're urging you to reject the project for our health and safety. And in some cases, climate. Ash Kalra was a great example of someone who saw the whole picture and brought all the pieces together in San Jose. But yeah, these are just some of the cities and counties. Most recently, the city of LA, they voted unanimously to write a letter against the project. In San Jose, it was also a unanimous vote, so it's noted that it brings people together who aren't always natural allies. There are cities like the city of Camarillo and city of Simi Valley here in Ventura County that are entirely Republican city councils. There are entirely Democrat ones that, so people are coming from both sides of the aisle and expressing their opposition and concern. At the same time, school boards, so 16 school boards, again, all up and down the route, are realizing that this is a public safety issue for them. They're state mandated disaster workers in the case of an emergency, so they have a responsibility to their students. And so the California Teachers Association has written a letter against it, and most recently the National Education Association, the biggest union in the country, wrote a letter to San Luis Obispo County to urge them to reject the project. So it's really bringing people together. The California Nurses Association has been a very strong partner.
And it comes down to 5 people.
Yes.
5 people.
Yeah, and really it's looking like one swing vote. So.
Yeah. Gee, why don't we just pay them off?
Because Phillips 66 has more money.
Is there any timetable when they're gonna
Man.
Yeah.
address this issue?
Yeah, so timetable, it's been delayed a long time, kind of like if anyone was involved in Keystone XL, which I was also involved in that fight, it was like, it went on for years and years, but that's often a good sign because, at that 6 years ago, it was expected that that would be a rubber stamp project. And what the outrage and the, overflowing comments and controversy is what kind of slows down the process. So they did get, we did a comment push during the environmental review process. They came out with a draft environmental impact report. We had 23,000 comments from all across the state. So that they'd never received anything close to that. I think the highest before that was like 800 comments they've received on a local project. So that slowed down the process a ton, but we're about a year later and they're about to come out with the final environmental impact report in December. They have a few tentative dates in February that will be the public hearing for the Planning Commission, which will make the original decision. That'll be appealed to the Board of Supervisors, they'll make a final decision, but that first body will have a ton of say in which way it goes. So
The EIR is gonna be out when?
the final will be out in December. And we've had a couple of false alarms with that, but it's been pretty consistent for a while that it is coming out in December.
Because they're usually like, I would think, 6 months or 3 months at least review time. And comment time on the EIR.
This is the final one. So
Where's
the draft one came out last year in November, and actually they've done 2 drafts. The first draft came out the spring before, the last draft came out November last year, and so they're finally finalizing the EIR, and then they'll go into the public comment period, the public hearing, where it's not just writing a comment, it's actually going and making your voices heard. And that's where it's going to be really, really important for folks all along the rail route who will be personally impacted to come and, look them in the eye and say, this project is going to affect me. Please make the right decision, not just for yourselves, but for your town, but for all of us.
How can people get a hold of the current draft?
You can go on the San Luis Obispo Planning Commission website, and it'll have the environmental impact report as well as all the letters that have come in, so you can read, the letter from San Jose, the letter from Santa Clara County, and many other cities and counties and school boards along the route. And I think Brian and let you know. So I would say maybe we can do a process of opting out if you'd like to. If you sign in tonight with your contact information, you can assume you won't get added to any crazy lists, but we will make sure that you know when the public hearing is and how you can get plugged in to get there if you'd like to do so.
One question about the scope of the EIR, does it just address the issues in San Luis Obispo County? Or does it kind of deal with the issues of trains coming through these cities?
It does a bit of both. Mostly it focuses on local impacts, but they do acknowledge that there will be impacts all along the main line. And they actually outlined 11 Class 1 impacts in this environmental impact report. Class 1 means significant and unavoidable. So they technically have to go through and justify, if they approve this project, justify why all these impacts that are significant and unavoidable are okay. And some of those are risks of derailments, explosions, fires all along the main line. The other ones, there's some ones around air pollution. I mean, we really get into that. But with the number of trains that are coming through, each one has 3 engines. So each engine emits the equivalent of 1,500 cars. So it's 4,500 cars for each train. And it's diesel, so it's the most toxic, types of air pollutants. So anyone who's along the route also is going to be impacted by those air quality, air pollution issues. So that is named in the report. Of course, the other part that I said is that I didn't say is just the environmental justice issues of who's primarily along these routes. And there was a study that came out that showed that 60% of the communities directly along the route are environmental justice communities based on class, race, and language. So there are inequalities in who's impacted as well. But it cuts through like at the end of the day, like it's bringing a lot of people together from all backgrounds because it just cuts right through so much of our state.
I have a question.
Can I actually say something?
Oh, sure.
Okay. I think I might actually be at the end. So just in a bigger framework, Brian started with the bigger issues at hand. That's one of the things that got me motivated, those 3 numbers that Bill McKibben outlined in the very, very beginning. I read that Rolling Stones article, and that's actually what made me want to devote my time, full-time working on climate and energy organizing. So that's kind of why I'm in this fight. And one of the cool things about this issue is that it starts with where people are at, right? Like, my kid goes to school in the blast zone. Like, I live right next to the tracks. I'm going to be affected by the air pollution. But we've seen that as activists get kind of see the bigger issue and the pattern of the oil industry routinely being willing to sacrifice the health, safety, and long-term sustainability, health, safety of the entire planet, then that starts to discredit that industry and have us looking for safer, better, cleaner alternatives. So we hope that it's moving folks from NIMBY, which is not in my backyard, to NOPE. Does anybody have a guess of what that is?
I should ask.
You know the answer. Anybody want to take a wild guess?
Not on my planet either. Not on my planet either.
Oh, that was so close. That was great. Not on planet Earth. Not on planet Earth. Great. And that's how we can come together and work for the bigger cause. So that's all that I have. And I'm ready to answer more questions.